Thank you very much. We have just dealt with confidential questions in relation to attachments for items 5.10, 6.4 and 8.2. So we'll continue to move through the agenda with the items we haven't already asked questions on. So I take us back to item 5.3, which is 165 Lake Street, Perth, alterations and additions to single house garage. Any questions? Manager, I did have a question on this one. I note that the garage is being built in the exact same position as it currently or previously has been. I was just interested in that this is a 3 metre wide right of way, and just whether in terms of the other built form along that laneway, is the thought in allowing this to stay with nil setback that there won't be a transition along this laneway over time, given that 3 metres is probably about as narrow as we get with our laneways?
Yes, to you, Mayor Cole. It isn't expected to widen in terms of the right of way. It's unlikely to change given the density coding of the adjoining properties, inability to subdivide, which is really where you obtain that road widening. So I guess given that it is a low volume and also low speed environment, the like for like replacement is appropriate.
Okay, that was my only question. Anything else, councillors? All right, thank you, Manager. We'll move to item 5.4, 742 Newcastle Street, Leederville, unlisted use, signage, addition to electric lane, amendment to approved. Any questions? Councillor Hallett.
I know that they don't actually have to provide this, but just wondering what the reason was for shifting
it. Through you, Mayor Cole, the reason is because when council previously approved this, the sign was to be affixed to an adjacent tenancy, Fried, which fronts onto Oxford Street. But since that approval, that ownership has now changed of Fried, and they no longer supported the sign being affixed to that premises. So the proponents have sought to relocate it further along the electric lane.
Thank you.
Did the city approach Fried? Oh, not, I mean, I assume it's the building owner rather than Fried, but the owner of the building separately to the Leederville Hotel, given that having a sign at the start of the laneway might be a better way finding outcome?
Mayor Cole, no, not that I'm aware of. Ultimately, in terms of its location, it is approximately 11 metres further set back. It would still be visible from Oxford Street, but ultimately it's something that's being proposed by these proponents. So the city did not seek to liaise with Fried to, I don't know, suppose encourage a certain outcome. We've just assessed it for what it's worth and on its own merits, and it's considered to be appropriate.
I do wonder in these circumstances if this is the ideal job for a, for a place manager to just have a conversation, but okay, it hasn't happened, so I take that on board.
Just through Mayor Cole, it won't matter in relation to this DA, that they'll still be able to do both. So we can reach out to them and find out whether that helps provide the location council's previously approved.
Just as a general thing, I think sometimes if the city approaches a landowner and has a different perspective about benefits to the high street, to, it can actually shift something where an owner goes to an owner and there's a worry about something that's impinging on their property, whereas city might bring a different perspective. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the signage? Okay. Item 5.5, 54 to 56, Lindsay Street, Perth, proposed additions and alterations to group dwellings. Any questions on this one? Manager, is this the one that's here, MHI category B, or is that the next one? I'm just trying to remember.
This one it is heritage listed. Let me just confirm. Yes, it is category B, yes.
This is category B.
Yes.
Just wanted to ask, and I know this is delegations, but just to sort of float it, we've got a MHI category B, which is at the owner's discretion, and it meets all the deemed to comply outcomes, so that council isn't exercising any discretion whatsoever. Is this potentially penalising someone who wants to put their house on an MHI category B to then have to go through a longer development application process? Like, I would probably just flag that I think this delegation is not necessary. If the delegation is around there's a variation and we need to exercise discretion, that could be something else, but this is deemed to comply 100%.
Yes, to you, Mayor Cole. Could it be seen as penalising the landowner? Yes, I could see how that could be perceived.
And do they even require? Would they even require to go through a development application process, given it's deemed to comply? I guess this one is group dwellings, but would it just be building license or?
No, because it's a heritage listed property, it's not exempt.
Okay.
I'd just add to that, last year when we put forward some suggested changes to delegations, councils did seek to consider all demolition on heritage listed properties, irrespective of whether it does or doesn't contribute to the statement of significance or the value, the heritage value of that property. It wasn't contemplated though at that time that perhaps where it meets, all the acceptable development standards or deemed to comply standards, that could be dealt with by administration.
Yeah, I think we've got 3 examples tonight, and it really does beg the question, are the delegations right? And is this making people jump through further development hoops because the heritage listed one doesn't really have an impact on the heritage of the built form? Question mark.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would be flagging that I think that we could review the delegations in this regard. Any other questions on Lindsay Street? Okay. Item 5.6, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to local planning policy number 7.5.1, minor nature development. Any questions? I'd just like to acknowledge the responsiveness to issues raised by council members and in community consultation on this one. So thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, item 5.7, amendment to the Municipal Heritage Inventory number 82, Palmerston Street, Perth. Any questions? I think this is another one where it's all deemed to comply. Just trying to find the table. Oh no, sorry, this is going on to the this is going on to the MHI, my apologies. Okay, any questions on this one? Right. Item 5.7, amendment. No, we've done that. We've done item 5.8 and 5.9. So and 5.10. So that concludes strategy and development items. We'll go to bike plan 22 to 28. Councillor Gonchevsky is leaving with a proximity interest. And Councillor Hallett. Thank you, Manager. Any questions on the bike plan? Councillor Loden.
Just wanted to raise there's a piece of feedback around bike speeds on Britannia again, which was obviously a topic that came up during, I think it was the AGM as well. And so just wanted to get administration's comments around how we can address the bike speeds on that section of the path.
Through the chair, through the detailed design, once we look at projects on Britannia Road, we can look at the speeds and we can pick certain traffic calming and landscaping options to slow speeds down.
Isn't the plan suggesting a second separated path on the east?
Through the chair, yes, there's a few options in and around Britannia. You've got the main PSP near the freeway, then you've got Britannia Reserve, and then you've got Britannia Road that leads from Oxford Street right through to the corner of, I think it's Federation Street. So yeah, there's a number of options around that area.
Okay, I thought the bike plan actually had a route on the east side. And when I took Seamus for a walk yesterday, I noted that there is sufficient space between the walking path and the lights for an additional path in that location. That's what I thought the bike plan had been suggesting.
Through the chair, I believe the bike plan identifies the routes, so the connections from road to road. Where exactly the bike path is located will be through the detailed design when the engineering team start designing up the options for the cycle facility.
Okay. Well, just to know there is an alternate to taking out the gnome village that's been growing nicely alongside the walking path. I just also wanted to request in the report, it doesn't actually say whether there were any changes made to the bike plan on the basis of consultation. Could there be a little bit more information, please, added into the report?
Through the chair, yes, we can add some info on the changes.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? All right. Item 6.2, approval to advertise the draft animal amendment local law. Any? Yep, I'm just reading out the item. We're talking about the animal local law, which had been disallowed, potentially. Any questions on this? I did have a question because I thought that the section that was disallowed actually went to cat containment, and I believed that we hadn't approved cat containment.
The requirement from the Joint Standing Committee on delegated legislation noted that that particular clause that we're amending by removal and also removing the penalty by its nature said that if there was a penalty if a cat wasn't contained on within the property, which essentially said that on the opposite side, cats would be penalised if they were found wandering, and which is not in alignment with the powers under the Cat Act. Therefore, we needed to remove that clause because it was seen as a way of trying to get around that. I don't believe it was the intention when it was written. I think they were actually trying to keep cats, on the property to a degree, but it was just that misalignment, so we needed to remove it.
It's interesting though, because the wording is each cat must be contained on the premises unless under the effective control of a person. But what we had talked about was that we would say there's certain areas that were cat prohibited. So this actually ended up being a clause which to me reads as cat containment. So I'm not surprised it was disallowed. And I'm sorry, did I miss something? I didn't think that's what we were angling for.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. No, we weren't angling for it. And yes, we do have the cat prohibited areas, and that was carried through. But this one particular clause snuck through, and which the Joint Standing Committee certainly took note of, and we needed to make those amendments to.
Yeah, but I guess we knew when we went into this that cat containment laws were outside of the Cat Act. So I'm surprised we had that clause in there because I don't recall council seeking to contain cats to the premises.
Agree, it went through several sets of eyes, including our lawyers, and it still managed to get through. So it's just, again, a case where we need to be more vigilant in looking at the drafting of the local laws and ensuring that we're not exceeding the powers that the head act, the overarching act, provides.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Item 6.3, glyphosate use in the City of Vincent. Questions, please. Question, Dan Loden, Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this is challenging because of the significant cost. But given glyphosate is a probable carcinogen, according to the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Is there any ways that we can be prioritizing higher risk locations, understanding that we're doing footpaths and so forth, but the report was unclear on how we're managing that in things like our parks?
Through you, Mayor Cole, at this stage, we haven't prioritised the elimination. As the report states, we do not spray in certain areas around playgrounds and also during school holidays. There are significant cost implications if we do choose to eliminate the use of glyphosate. The details on these I don't think have been properly explored. But we can look into those. But yeah, at this stage, I don't think we're quite there unless council would like to recommend a trial location so we can get some cost estimates. Then yeah.
So I guess probably follow up that the report sort of distinguishes the looking at curbs and sidewalks and so forth as where most of the investigation work was done. If we were to look at across the city in terms of where our most significant uses is that the dominant use of glyphosate, and therefore we're using a relatively small amount in our parks and areas where we've got more active uses, or is bulk of it actually occurring in those more active use spaces where there's potentially a higher risk of interaction with the community?
Honestly, it would vary from park to park, and also what I guess treatments are in a park. As noted previously, it's essential for our current eco-zoning program and the maintenance of that. I suppose the steam treatment was looked at predominantly in streetscapes because that's what other LGs have done. Given that steam treatment is not overly favoured in parks and reserves because of its ability to kill the microorganisms and the root structures of surrounding plants. So that as part of the Walgal Weed Management Group, not many local governments do opt for steam treatment in parks and reserves and garden areas. It's predominantly on those hard surfaces such as town centres and streetscapes where the residual effects of steam, I guess, are minimal. If we were to look at eliminating glyphosate in parks and reserves, my opinion, based on my experience, would be obviously integrated weed management such as mulching and suppression planting, but it would probably realistically come down to manual removal. So that has a significant FTE or contractor as budget implications.
I guess what I'm ultimately wondering is there's sort of an estimate of the total cost, significant cost. I think it's about 2% increase in rates. Not to put words in anybody's mouth, probably not acceptable. I'm wondering if there's a middle ground that we can steer here, but we'd have to get an understanding of it. So if hypothetically we were to shift to doing this only in a certain portion of the city, would that be a step that we could take? So I guess I'd be interested in if there is an option around that, recognizing that if we are going to manual removal of weeds in parks, that's probably even more horrendously expensive.
Yeah, I think bottom line, unfortunately, that is the case. Any alternatives to glyphosate are more expensive. So yeah, I guess, like I said, we can look at doing a trial in a park and extrapolate the costs, but unfortunately, in terms of parks and reserves, we don't have any data on the increased costs at this stage. Just yeah, it's predominantly based on streetscapes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I presume when you spray the substance, what we then see is it all marked out in blue. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So when our parks teams do spray, they put out signage as per the regulations, and they also put in mark dye so that the community or the public is notified of its application.
Okay, thank you on that. Does the city have any responsibility if it's a known carcinogenic and we do use it? Are we exposing ourselves to any form of litigation or?
At this stage, we're governed by the APVMA, which is the regulatory body on all chemicals. So essentially, they have stated that all glyphosate products are still registered for use in Australia and have been through a thorough and robust chemical risk assessment process, and have concluded that the weight of evidence indicates that exposure to glyphosate does not pose a carcinogenic or genotoxic risk to humans. So at this stage, we're governed by their statements and their findings.
Okay, I'm tempted to say we check other parts of the world and what they do, but that would perhaps be handy, but I might just leave that one alone. Thanks.
Councillors, questions? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Michael. I think the people far and away most at risk are our personnel that are applying it. Do we have kind of written procedures like safe work method statements, that kind of thing, dictating how we handle and apply it?
Yeah, we do. We have obviously job safety analysis, and we also undertake periodical safe herbicide application training for all of our staff.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have one.
Yes,
quick one.
Councillor Bonashevsky.
Thank you for that information in relation to the workplace health and safety. If I could just in the briefing notes get some confirmation in relation to the Department of Health recommends that local government LGAs refer to a guide to pest management of pesticides in local government pest control programs in WA. And that document has a section around, recommended or appropriate standards or equipment and all that should be in place for team members that are using the substance. So I note your commentary in relation to Councillor Wallace's question, but I'd just be grateful if in the briefing notes you could get a review of that document and just confirmation that that the persons employed by the City of Vincent to apply and handle pesticides, including glyphosate, adhere to the pest management technicians employed by LGA section of the Guide to the Management of Pesticides in Local Government Pest Control Programs in WA. Thank you.
Happy to include that in the
Thanks so much. Should be pretty quick.
Thank you.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a question, have we considered potentially a longer term project trialling the use of volunteers for manual weeding? Because that could reduce the amount of FTE required in the long term. It requires some supervision, but not actual physical man hours, woman hours by our staff. It's actually a model that's used quite successfully in Kings Park with the volunteers that I manage. And it's a question that we could consider, obviously not for the decision next week, but perhaps looking into a trial in a particular park area that people might be interested in contributing.
Yeah, that's a really good comment. That is something that I have been thinking about myself. We do have one community group, the Claysbrook Catchment Group, who I'm sure you're all aware of, that do weed control in a couple of key projects that they're in charge of, I suppose. But it is important to know that one of them, they still request us to do periodic chemical application as well for the control of running grasses, which are nigh on impossible to move manually. But however, having said that, it does reduce the amount of chemical application, which I guess is the end goal as well.
Manager, I think one of the things that we've previously advised the communities, I remember when David Gerard came on board, he looked at the the way in which agriculture machinery could be used in terms of having a much more targeted application of glyphosate. I didn't see that mentioned in the report. Thought that was
I can add that to the report if you like, but yes, that is what we do for our curb line and footpath spraying. So there's machinery that essentially identifies chlorophyll and then sprays. So rather than blanket spray, it's target spraying on actual plant weed growth in that situation. So if you'd like that added to the report, I can.
Yeah, and I just wondered, does the city have any idea of, where we've come from, say, over the past 5 years in terms of glyphosate use volumes? I don't know if that's sort of data that you would have, had an indication of in terms of the purchasing of glyphosate volumes now with a more targeted approach versus what it has been in the past.
I can look into that and add it to the report.
Yeah, and then, I guess going to Councillor Loden's point, it's then about, what volume have we been applying? Where are we at now? What strategies, whether voluntary community days or steaming or whatever it's going to, whatever it looks like, if, rather than saying we're not using glyphosate anymore and having considerable cost. And I think the report, makes a good job of highlighting that some of the organic and steam and hot water options are actually tricky in and of themselves. I guess I probably should wait to make my comments at the meeting, but I think that having some kind of metric in terms of the city's use over time is probably valuable in terms of demonstrating to the community where we've come from and where we're at now, at least. And then in consideration of if the city was to look at further measures, what impact that might have on the use.
Yeah.
Any questions, councillors? Okay. Moving on then, we've dealt with Beatty Park request for tender. So we'll go to community and business services items 7.1 financial statements as at the 31st of May. 7.2 authorisation of expenditure for 1st to 31st of May. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just one that piqued my interest. Sorry, I'll just find it. All right, I probably can't. Oh yes, here we go. $17,523 for Bain Marie supplies. Is that how much a Bain Marie costs? How many Bain Maries do we have, and are they empty or full, etc.? That sort of thing.
Through Mayor Cole, I'll check if that relates to Beatty Park cafe area or not, but we include that in the briefing note. That's my educated guess. I think it might be related to the Beatty Park cafe or maybe the community centre kitchen. I'll check.
If it's related to any premises that we have under lease, if we could just get confirmation that that is our cost, or whether that'll be something that will be recouped from the lessee.
Yes, we're also upgrading the kitchens in North Perth Town Hall currently, so we'll figure out where that is.
Yeah, number of Bain Maries as well that gets us. Thanks.
Any further questions on expenditure? Item 7.3 investment report as at 31st of May. Councillor Hallett.
Similar piqued interest. There was just a cost of 31 grand for the Imagine Vincent subscription, which made me think that I vaguely recall, but I may have made it up, that we were doing a bit of a review of whether that platform was being I guess fit for purpose for our consultation, and whether I could have an update on the status of that.
Through Mayor Cole, we can include some background in the briefing notes. It's called the suppliers EHQ Bang the Table. I think it's widely considered, certainly in the government context, the best of breed, and it's the standard platform for most public sector agencies. Not that there isn't other options, and there's different costs involved with that, but we'll provide some background information. But there's obviously some sunk cost and investment in that platform that now we've been on it for quite a long time, that there would be a transition cost to move. We'll provide some further background in the briefing notes.
Any further questions? Thank you. So we'll move then to item 7.4, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to recognition of Noongar Boodja culture and history through a welcome to country and acknowledgement of country. Councillor Warner.
Look, I don't know if I'm missing it, but I can see that we put this out to community consultation and where we put it, but I can't see if we actually received any submissions back from that.
I think this goes to the point I sort of raised about the bike plan. It's like it really needs to be clear. What was received? Was it 0? If it wasn't 0, what was it? Summary, and then what changes happened. But yes.
Through Mayor Cole, we received one submission at attachment 3, which is the last page of the report.
I think it should still, like, rather than just referring to an attachment, can the report actually say this was the sentiment and it either resulted in a change or a modification or it didn't?
Yes, so the coming report noted that we received one submission at attachment 3, and our view was that the submission wasn't really relevant to the policy review that we were undertaking.
And perhaps that sentence could be finished.
Yeah, thank you for that. But I see in the other reports we usually say we've received 6 or whatever. So that would just be great. Just because I did miss it, obviously. Thank you.
I think the intent is, though, that a report is a summary of the item.
Through Mayor Cole, the submission received attachment 3 is 3 sentences long, and we just noted it because it wasn't relevant to the policy review that we were undertaking.
I get that, having read it, but I think the report could simply say we didn't find the submission relevant and there's been no change to the policy. Thank you. Certainly don't find that comment relevant at all. It's quite rude. Okay, Chief Executive Officer items, 8.1, appointment to the Western Australian Local Government Association Central Metropolitan Zone Council representatives. Any questions? Councillor Hallett, can I ask you, are you happy to take this on?
Yep.
Okay, so I can add your name to the recommendation. If anyone else wants to join also, there's space. Are you considering it, Councillor Castle?
No, but I did look up when the next meeting was, and it's while Councillor Hallett and I are attending the company directors course.
Oh,
Hence, I won't be putting my hand up, and I was alerting Councillor
Oh,
Hallett to
you
that.
can
But
miss
he's
one,
braver
Maxine.
than I.
Councillor Wallace might be able to get to that one. But there is space if anyone else wants to, but we were looking for at least one, and I think the report can come back with that filled in to say Councillor Hallett, and if anyone else would like to join, feel very free to. There has
I
been
can't get to
some,
that one. Sorry, Michael. Yeah. The last 3 months or so, TPRC has been scheduled over the top of it. But
Yeah.
It seems there's a gap next month. So
yeah, great. Well, there has been some interesting discussion on tree canopy advocacy happening through the zones, which has been good. All right, thank you. If anyone changes their mind in the interim, just send through an email. 8.2 we've dealt with, so that takes us to 8.3, the information bulletin. Any questions on the info bulletin? Councillor Loden?
Just on the development statistics, I was curious because we've been looking at this for about 7 years now, but we don't actually have any data that shows how many applications we processed in a given year and a total value for that. And I was wondering if you did have that data available, because that would be interesting to get a gauge of, I guess, the work rate and how we've progressed over that time as well. And I was also curious to know how, if this is represents a significant workload for administration, because it may be potentially unnecessary bureaucracy.
Through Mayor Cole, we have that data. I'll take those on notice and provide a response in the briefing notes.
And in terms of recognize, I've just asked for more information and then have potentially flagged creating work and then flagged maybe this is too much work. Do you have a gauge on how much effort it is to put this in the briefing each month?
It will take that on notice and provide that info through. We do two separate reporting lines. So there's a separate report that goes to EMC every month as well as this. So we are doubling up, but I'll ask the team and we'll provide that info in the briefing notes about how much time it takes for us to put this together.
And through Mayor Cole on that, we are down to 65 days, the average processing time. But there's a huge there's a huge spectrum between short and simple DAs, and then what you council have seen and the JDAP members have seen, some very large, complex, complicated, controversial DAs, which would take an entire officer offline to review 300 odd submissions on.
I think our SAT reviews director would be probably at our highest number in a while, would you say?
Since I arrived, yes, 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've had a volunteer to go to Brookman or Moya. Moya, thank you for that, Councillor Loden. Councillor Alexandra and I went along to the roller shutter matter, and I did a presentation at the Stop the Station, Ango Street Station. Oh, okay. All right. Any other questions on the info bulletin? Okay. All right. Well, that concludes the business for this evening. So thank you very much to administration. Thank you, councillors, for your attendance, and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday night for the council meeting where we can revisit these items again. Thanks all.